Hi, everybody. Welcome to Couch Counsel. My name is Jaime Wisegarver, and I'm here with my partner, Andy Sherrod. And this week, we are going to be discussing vaccine mandates, where we are now, and where do we go from here. Andy, kick us off and give us the lay of the land with respect to these vaccine mandates.
Well, Jamie, it's really been a whirlwind. Lots for employers to take in, lots of litigation over these various mandates. To quickly recap, there were basically three federal mandates that employers were dealing with. The one that got the most attention was the so-called OSHA rule, which applied to companies of 100 employees or more. And that rule required either vaccination or weekly testing. The second big rule was a federal contractor requirement that came through an executive order that was issued. And that applied to certain companies that do business with the federal government and its agencies. That rule actually required a mandatory vaccination. There was no testing option under the federal contractor rule. The third requirement came down from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. And that rule applied to certain healthcare provider facilities that participated in the Medicare Medicaid programs. And that was also a vaccine mandate. After a lot of litigation, basically where we are right now is that the OSHA rule in its current form is no longer. The federal contractor rule is on hold, and the CMS rule has survived. The OSHA rule, it was withdrawn after a Supreme Court decision in its temporary form, but could come back in some other shape or form later in the year, perhaps through the proposed permanent standard, because the OSHA is still testing that out. But it's not going to look exactly like it looks today. The federal contractor requirement is currently under a nationwide injunction, but it's still working its way through the court system. So perhaps in the weeks and months to come, there could be movement on that rule. But as it stands right now, unless you are a Medicare, Medicaid covered facility for which the CMS rule is applicable to you, there is no longer a mandatory vaccine requirement through the federal government. So does that mean if you're not a Medicare, Medicaid facility that you can just throw caution to the wind as it applies to COVID-19 safety, Jamie?
No, it doesn't. You can't throw COVID safety out the window just because these mandates are no longer in place. Employers still have a general duty to maintain a safe work environment for their employees. So, for example, it would not be advisable for an employer to allow COVID positive employees to walk around the office. That could be construed as a violation of the OSHA general duty clause. But employers could even go beyond the OSHA general duty clause and impose some policies of their own. Whether or not they want to do so likely depends upon what industry the employer is in or what their workplace environment is like. For example, if you're in the manufacturing industry and you've got a bunch of employees that are working really close together, maybe you want to have some sort of vaccination mandate in place. Alternatively, if you're in an office where most people are vaccinated and folks are being relatively careful, then maybe you're comfortable with a voluntary vaccination policy. A couple things to keep in mind for employers: you're going to want to make sure that you are not in a state that has a law prohibiting a vaccination mandate, if that's something that you're interested in imposing. And then, of course, you're going to want to be mindful of the medical and religious exemptions to a vaccination mandate that can apply. Another thing, there's a little bit more flexibility now for employers without the mandates in place. For example, the OSHA rule did not allow employers to accept self-administered, self-read COVID tests. But now, without that in place, maybe that's something that employers could implement in their facilities. For example, having employees take a take-home test and then self-report the results. That gives a little bit more flexibility and makes it a little less burdensome for employers who are looking to implement some additional safety precautions like a weekly testing requirement. Okay, so Andy, if for employers that are looking to implement a policy, what are some of the things that they need to be thinking about now?
Well, Jamie, I think as you touched on, I mean, there's no one size fits all approach here. I think that it will largely be dependent on, what your workplace environment looks like, what the risk factors are, um, you know, what what your vaccination head count is currently. Do you need to encourage people to get vaccinated more than currently exists? Have you had a wave of infections? Have you seen excessive absenteeism? Has it hurt productivity? Do you have a strong, uh, you know, anti-vaccination contingent in your workforce that would not react well to a mandate? I mean, those are all the factors that you can really consider for yourself and make a decision as to what's best for your business now that you're not necessarily required to do one thing or another by virtue of these rules that were in place. So I think it really comes down to maintaining your company culture, and I think folks would be well served to just take a step back, think about that this is something that people feel strongly about on both sides. So you're not going to make everybody happy, but I think emphasizing that whatever decision is being made, in the best interests of the workforce and with the goal of maintaining the health and welfare of everybody that works for you. I mean, if that can be the message and the theme in terms of whether you roll out a vaccine requirement or you take a step back and simply encourage vaccination, either way, emphasizing that we're still keeping health and safety top of mind. We're doing our best to make sure that we allow our business to keep moving forward, but keeping everybody safe. That's hopefully going to go a long way to making whatever policy you adopt a successful one.
Thanks so much, Andy. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you have questions about anything we've discussed, please feel free to reach out to us.